Hi everybody, Mike here again, talking to you about some fabrication stuff today. I've been working in the shop and making a few rings for some porcelain signs that I've been collecting. So I kind of wanted to walk you through the process of how I make a ring for one of these signs. I've made these two. This is a 42-inch ring and a 16-inch ring. I'm using a Harbor Freight bender with some swag off-road upgrades to it. The 16-inch ring is about the smallest ring that I can make with this bender, because what ends up happening is the ring starts hitting the top of this, and about 16 inches is all you can get out of this. The 42-inch ring is a little bit easier to make, and that's what I'm going to be making as well today. I'm going to be making another 42-inch ring for an early Texaco sign that I have. So I kind of wanted to walk you through the process of how I make these rings. So this is the sign that I'm going to be making the ring for today. It's a 42-inch Texaco sign. A little bit of prep work. I start off by making a radius template of the sign. This sign doesn't measure exactly 42 inches. It's about 41 5/8 of an inch. So I make a radius template for my bends just by placing this under the sign, tracing around it, and cutting it out. I also do a little bit of math, figure out what the circumference of the sign is going to be. I call it 131 inches, and I start with a piece of base material that's 151 inches. So I add in 20 inches of extra material for waste, 10 inches per side. The base material that I use is a piece of handrail cap. It comes in 20-foot sticks. They make a lot of different profiles of it. In my area, this was about the easiest profile to come by. The sign goes on the inside edge here, and the outside offers a nice decorative finish. So what I did with the Harbor Freight bender was I made custom dies to fit this. So what I ended up doing was taking the original Harbor Freight dies, I welded them completely up. These were made as tube dies. I welded them completely up and then machined in the profile of the inside of the handrail cap and the outside of the handrail cap on the bottom ones. So the bender is, well, at least the dies are pretty specific to this style handrail cap. Okay, so now we're ready to roll it. I've cut my piece to 151 inches and I'm going to start rolling it. What I found works the best is when you're advancing the jack to be continuously rolling it back and forth. Don't have the material stopped in one place while you're moving the jack. It's a little easier said than done, but try and keep the material moving as the jack is being advanced downward. And then you just slowly go after it. You keep checking it against your radius gauge, and you keep going back and forth until it'll start touching the ends will start touching each other. Then you can kind of stop there and see how far you need to go from there. So here we are, we're gonna keep rolling it. It's not a very fast process. And you keep going right until you get to the edge of your die and go all the way back to the other side. So now we'll advance it about a half a pump. And you can see the curve starts forming pretty quickly. Same thing, about another half of a pump. You also notice quite a bit of mill scale builds up on the inside. I like to keep an air hose and just kind of blow that away. Keeps the dies a little bit cleaner. And we'll go another half a pump. You can see our ends are almost starting to touch each other now. And what you can do is kind of offset one side and roll it to where your stopping point was. And what we can do is check our radius against our radius gauge. We're getting close, but still got to go a little bit more. Get rid of some of that mill scale again. And we're going to go like a quarter of a pump this time. We're pretty close. Don't worry if you go over a little bit. You can kind of manipulate it by hand to spring it back out. Let's check that once more. Still got to do a little more to go. I'm going to guess that we overshot that a little bit. That's not a problem. We'll double check with our radius gauge. Yep, we were a little bit over, but that's not a problem. So now what I do is I take it out of the machine, retract the jack, get it up as high as you can get it. Try not to get killed. And you can roll it out. But so you can easily manipulate it by hand and kind of pull it back out. And I'm not too worried about the roundness of it right now. I'll show you how we can correct that in just a moment. So you can see the ends of the ring. This is what our extra 20 inches are for on the base material. When the roller stops about here, so you get this flattened piece here and a kind of a funky curve right here. So what I did was I marked 2 lines, and I'm going to trim 9.5 inches off either side. That'll get me close, but still leave a little bit of extra material for final fitting. So I'll trim this off and then I'll show you what I do next. So here's the ring after I trimmed the 9.5 inches off either side. You can see it's not a perfect circle. It's a little bit of an oval. The ends don't match up very well. And we need this pretty darn close to a perfect circle. So what I end up doing is I place it back in the bender, and I put a tack weld on the open joint there, and I roll it around several times to get it to a perfect circle. So I'll show you how I set it up and show you the end result. So what I do now is I install the ring back into the bender, and I just put a little bit of pressure on it to kind of hold it in place. And then I tack weld the 2 ends together. You want to put a pretty good gap between the 2 ends so that you can get a nice solid tack on it. These tacks have a tendency to break as you're re-rolling this, just because you have to grind the weld down so much in order to get it to pass through your dies, that there's not a whole lot of weld material left in it. So put a nice gap in there so you got something to fill in, and put a good heavy fat tack on it, and then grind it down. So you end up with something like that when you're all said and done, tack welding and grinding it. And you can notice from the side, there's clearly a pretty good kink in the roundness of this ring. So what we're gonna do is roll it back out. We'll set it back up, we'll put a little bit of light pressure on it, and we'll roll it back and forth several times to get it more to a round state. All right, back and forth we go. Put a little bit of pressure on it. And you'll feel it, it'll start getting some pressure right where that kink is. And it'll feel loose in the other areas, but that's kind of what you want. I've also found it helpful to put your seam directly under your movable die. Put it right at the bottom, and you bring your jack down with it still this time. You can put that was about a pump and a half of pressure on it, and go back and forth just a little bit right there. Maybe that was a little too much, so we'll back off a little. Keep going around. Now don't be afraid if your tack breaks here. There's a lot of pressure being put on that one little joint, but that's the area you kind of want to concentrate on. If it breaks, it's not that big of a deal. You got to break it anyway to get it out, back out of the machine. I ended up rolling the ring a little bit too much. So I took it out, and off camera, I straightened out the edges in the vise. I just put them in the vise, kind of straightened them out slightly to get the seam to line up pretty well. And if you check it with the radius gauge, it's pretty close right now. Let's see if I can get it on there. Yeah, there we go. It's close. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So what we'll do now is we'll end up fitting it to the sign itself. This part is slightly tedious, but what I do is I lay the ring around the sign, and then I look at what kind of clearance I've got on the edges all the way around it, and I look at my gap. And then I typically cut about 1/4 of an inch per side off. Maybe I'll do that until I've taken about 1/2 inch per side off. And then I'll keep fitting it every time I do it. And then I'll cut back to taking about 1/8 inch per side off, and I can final fit it. The goal is when the sign is tight, that the ring is also tight. So that's kind of what I'm going for. So, like I said, take your time with this part. It's tedious. Sometimes I'll make 5 or 6 cuts per side before I'm happy with it, but I just final fit it to the actual sign. All right, so we fitted our ring by trimming the ends to kind of close it in around the ring. I've left a little bit gap so that once we put the tightening bolt on it, it'll cinch it in. The only thing left to do now is to add your tightening bolt and add some mounting brackets. For the tightening bolt, all I do is I tack the ring together where I think I want it, and then I will weld on this small piece of tubing. This is 1/2 by 3/8 tube. I just center it up in the middle, and I weld it across the seam like that. For the mounting points, I use some 3/8 inch round bar. I bend it into a U first, and then I put a little kick on it like that, and it'll sit on the edge of the ring similar to that. And it leaves you with a nice kind of a point where you can attach a chain to it and hang it from your sign bracket. So I'm going to get those welded on, and I'll be back. One other thing I want to touch on is how to lay out the hooks for hanging the sign. I like to have the split at the dead bottom, and then I want a certain dimension between the two hooks for whatever sign bracket this is going to go on. This particular one, I'm looking for 29 inches between the two hooks. So what I did was I lay out a 90-degree angle on the ground. That locates the ring in the center, and I put the split at the dead bottom. Then I strike a 45-degree line off of this line. So this is 45 degrees, go straight up. And then whatever my brackets are, so this is 29, so I go 14.5 from the center over, 14.5 from the center over, and that's 29 inches. I typically tack my brackets on right while I'm on the ground, and I line them up so that they're perfectly over the top of the line. That gives me the right spacing that I'm looking for. And it also makes it so that the split is directly at the bottom. So I'll get them welded on and put this on the sign and show you my final product. So here it is, the finished product. It's a 42-inch sign ring. It's got hooks that are 29 inches apart and the seam at the dead bottom. Overall, I have about roughly 2 hours of time into building each ring. There's definitely some hand manipulation, and I like to fit them to the actual sign that they're going to go on. This sign has got some patina to it, and it's got a little bit of wave here and there, some bends in it, so it doesn't fit dead flat into the ring. So that caused the ring to be just slightly bigger than I would have anticipated it being. So I took less out of the seam than I was really thinking I was going to need to. So yeah, this is how I roll rings. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it or the best way to do it. It's just how I do it. So hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching. Goodbye.